afternoon, good evening, whatever applies to you. I hope you're well and welcome to Big Foodie Geek, and I am the Big Foodie Geek. Now, one of my favourite meats to have when I go out to a restaurant is ribs, but not just spare ribs. I love beef short ribs. These are beef short ribs. As you can see, they're not just your usual ordinary spare ribs. They are big, fat, chunky ribs. They are kind of like the lower part of the ribs, not like the upper part, the longer part of the ribs. They are big and meaty and they've got amazing flavour, but they need a long time cooking. So do normal ribs, to be fair, but these need extra time for cooking. So I've only ever done these at home once and they came out alright. In this video, I want to try cooking these again, but I want to try two different methods. And one of those methods is this. This is my electric smoker. I did a video probably about a year ago using this. I made a beef brisket in this and it turned out so much better than I thought it would, because electric smoking indoors does not seem like a thing that you should be able to do. But it actually did really well. It did a beautiful cut of beef brisket. It smoked it beautifully and it tasted amazing and it was really succulent, and I was just really surprised at how well this thing did. But I haven't used this thing since then, so I want to give it another spin. So I thought, let's do spare ribs in here and see how we get on and see if it actually does those any good as well. But as I said, I want to try a couple of different methods. So I'm not just using this time, because I'm also going to use my pressure cooker. I think I've used this on the channel at least once before. I think for some bao buns or something like that, I did the meat in here, and it worked really well. And I've not used it too much since then, but it is a really effective method for cooking meats that usually take long and slow in much shorter time. So I thought, let's do a couple of ribs in the smoker, let's do a couple of ribs in the pressure cooker and see how we get on, see whether the smoker actually does them any good, and see if this does them any good as well and in a shorter time. So I'm going to be doing two of these in the smoker probably for about 3 hours, and then I'm going to be doing two of them in the pressure cooker maybe for about an hour, and see how we get on and see how much better or worse either of them do against the other. Maybe they'll both be crap, maybe they won't, maybe they'll both be fantastic, but I really want to see how they both fare and see how much time the different cooking methods take and the quality of both. But either way, hopefully I'll get some really nice beef short ribs out of these, and also we'll have a couple of cooking methods, potentially doing these at home indoors without the need for a barbecue or a outdoor smoker or anything like that. So let's get started. So before we do anything else, I want to prepare a rub for my short ribs, because basically I want the same seasonings across both sets of ribs so we can actually compare and contrast them really closely and see how much better one cooking method is than the other. Or maybe they won't be better than each other. Perhaps they'll be both as good as each other for different reasons. I'm going in with a teaspoon of smoked paprika, half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, a teaspoon of ground cumin, a teaspoon of garlic powder, half a teaspoon of white pepper, half a teaspoon of black pepper, half a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of chipotle chili flakes, a teaspoon of dried thyme, and a teaspoon of dried rosemary. Let's just get in there and mix that all together. You'll notice I did put some smoky flavours in there with the smoked paprika and the chipotle chili flakes, so obviously that smoky flavour will go onto the ones in the pressure cooker, but the ones in the smoker will obviously have extra smokiness from the wood chips I'm going to be using. And these are the wood chips I'm going to be using today. I'm using cherry wood chips because they seem like a really nice type of wood chip to use, and it says it's got a sweet mild flavour that goes great with virtually everything. So hopefully it will go really well with our short ribs. So let's get these short ribs into the bowl. You can see how big and chunky those short ribs are. Got some really nice meat in here, but also a good bit of fat on there. So we're going to want to render down this fat and cook this nice and slow, so obviously you get nice tender meat, because if you don't with these things, they are going to be tough as heck. So let's just get this all over here, get this rubbed all over these ribs. So two of these I'm going to need now to put into my smoker, but two of those I don't need yet because the pressure cooker is going to take a lot less time, or hopefully a lot less time than the smoker. So I'm going to pop two of these back into my bowl, and I'm going to cover them with cling film, and I'm going to pop those into the fridge until I need them. So essentially they're going to have like a bit of a dry marinade with those flavours in the fridge. But these ones we can get into our smoker right now. So here's the electric smoker. If you didn't watch the previous video, then I'll quickly run through what this is all about again. Obviously this allows you to smoke indoors, and inside it we've got a rack which is what our meat will sit on. We've got the charring cup here which will have our wood chips in it. You can see obviously it's got some charring on it now because I've used it before. Then it's got several options on the front. We've got cold smoke, hot smoke and combined smoke. So essentially cold smoke is smoking your meats or whatever it is you're doing at a very low temperature, probably about 30 degrees C, which will help get that flavour into it, but not get any sort of like real cooking on it. It's really good for things like smoking garlic and stuff like that. And we've got the hot smoke, which is then obviously cooking whatever it is you're doing as well. And combined smoke is obviously those two methods combined. So it will start off with a cold smoke to get the flavour into it, and then hot smoke to then obviously get the cooking into it. Timer is exactly what it says, allows you to put the time onto it so you know how long you're cooking for, and then start and stop. So I'm going to use the combined smoke today. I'm probably going to do it for about 3 hours and see how we get on. I think 3 should be enough for those short ribs. So let's get some of those wood chips into our charring cup. Let's tilt that up so we can see a bit better. Good thing about this is you don't need loads and loads of wood chips. So obviously with a big bag like I've got, those will go a long way. So on with the lid on our charring cup. So I'm going to pop in my rack with it that way up so we can get the meat a little bit above that charring cup so it's not sitting too close. And then we'll pop those on there. So I would have had space for all 4 of those ribs in here, but obviously I'm only doing 2 in here today. Then let's get that lid on, make sure it's all well sealed in, make sure that bung is right in the hole as well. Then let's get this programmed in. So we're going with combined smoke, and then I want to do my timer for about 3 hours. There we go. And then let's just start. So that will start the combined smoke process, and I now just leave that for that 3 hours, and then I'll come back, see how it's got on, and then obviously if it needs any longer, I'll give it a bit longer, but hopefully that should be enough, and then I can work on the pressure cooker short ribs. So for those of you who kind of haven't seen how the electric smoker gets on, this has been barely a minute, and can already see the smoke that it is generating to cook our meat in. It is coming out the sides of it a bit, but it's not too bad. I will chuck on the extractor fan, which is sitting above my hob, which is why it's sat on there. But that, you can kind of see how effective it is at creating the smoke in there, in case you were skeptical about it. See, there you go. That has just counted down by a minute. So that is literally like the first minute's worth of smoke. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it to do its thing for the next 2 hours and 59 minutes.
3 hours later.
Okay, it's been 3 hours that these short ribs have been going for in my smoker. So let's take this lid off and see how we're doing. See if we need any more time, or see if these look good to go. Oh, hello. Look at those. You can see the meat shrunk down back off the bone. So these are looking pretty good to me. I think what these need now is they need time to rest. I'm going to wrap these up in foil and pop them into the oven at a low temperature so they can kind of keep on cooking at very low temperature and hopefully finish off what that smoker's doing. And while those are in the oven, I can get on with doing the other short ribs in the pressure cooker. It looks like they've got a really nice crust. There's an amazing smell coming from these, and honestly I can't wait to try it. But those look very, very good indeed. So I'm really happy with how those have turned out, at least from look. We'll have to see how they taste and see how tender they are. Right, so I'm just going to wrap these up in some foil. These smell absolutely fantastic, by the way. The smokiness coming from them is phenomenal. You get slight sweetness from the cherry wood, and it is amazing. So those are all wrapped up. I'm popping them into the oven. So those are just going to stay in that oven for another hour at a low temperature, probably only about 60, 70 degrees C. While those are in there, I can get on with the pressure cooker short ribs. I've got my pressure cooker over a fairly high heat here, and I've already got some oil, which is pretty dang hot at the moment. And what I want to do with my short ribs is I'm just going to sear them a bit in that oil, just to get a bit of colour, because obviously these don't have the smokiness from the electric smoker. So I'm just going to give these a little bit of help with a little bit of extra flavour by quickly searing them in that oil. Not lots, I don't want to cook them too much at this stage, just get some browning, some nice colour on them. There's no reason why you couldn't do this with the electric smoker as well, get a bit of searing on them before you put them in the smoker. But I think I'm just going to give these a good searing because I think the smoke from the electric smoker will be enough. Right, we've got a nice bit of colour on there, so I'm going to pop these onto a plate for a moment. I'm going to pop in some red onion, which will just be adding some extra flavour and also give us something for those to sit on in the pan. Then I'm popping our meat back onto those onions. Then obviously we want some liquid in there for our short ribs that are cooking, so I'm just putting in some nice beef stock. Then I'm going to pop the lid on, seal that in. So I've made sure that my pressure cooker is set so that it's going to keep all that lovely steam in. And essentially that steam, because it is being locked in, there's nowhere for really much of it to escape. It means that the temperature will go higher than the 100 degrees that it usually would before it would evaporate off. And basically it will go a higher temperature and cook that meat a lot quicker than it usually would. I'm going to give it about an hour, see how it gets on, and then we can see if it needs a bit more time, but hopefully 1 hour should be enough. So essentially, what will be almost like a quarter of the time that I'll be cooking the other meat for. So my timer's just gone off. This has just hit the 1 hour mark of being in the pressure cooker. So I want to let off all of the excess steam from here and then see how these short ribs have come out in the pressure cooker and see if it needs a bit more time. So I'm going to turn this and let out all that steam. Whoa! Okay, that's settled down. Let's get this lid off. Right, these have shrunk down off the bone like the ones in the smoker have, but obviously we haven't got all that lovely bark on it. They still look pretty good. I wonder how tender these are. These might need a little bit longer, you know. I might say perhaps another 10 or 15 minutes in there. Instead of stock, I'm going to go in with some beer, because that will work quite nicely with it, I think. Some non-alcoholic lager. That'll create a nice liquid and go together really well. And I'm going to pop that lid back on and just give it another 15 minutes in there, and then I think that'll be in a good place. This has had another 15 minutes, so I'm going to let the steam off again. Okay, lid off. Okay, that is pretty much falling off of that bone now, so I'm not going to give it any longer. I am going to give it some time to rest though, so I'm going to wrap it in foil like the last one, not give it too long, but just enough time to rest up a bit while I clean up this pan, and then we can compare and contrast and see how these beef short ribs have come out. Okay, it's time to compare and contrast our beef short ribs. Now, these are the ones that were done in the pressure cooker. You might be able to tell that because obviously you haven't got the bark, but what they do have is that they have completely fallen off the bone, so hopefully they are nice and tender, and they've also obviously had the benefit of cooking in that stock, basically the beef stock, and then the beer that I put in for another 15 minutes. So I just want to see how these slice. So I'm going to go into this one and just kind of see how tender it is. Actually, that's pretty tender actually. That kind of comes away quite nicely. It could have probably even had even longer actually. That is a pretty tender looking beef short rib. So only an hour and 15 minutes to kind of get to that point. And that is still like a quarter of the time that I've given the other one. That looks pretty good. I'm not going to taste it yet because I want to kind of see how the other ones come out. These are the indoor smoker ones. This is the one that's had 3 hours in the smoker and then an hour in the oven at a very low temperature. So I want to see how these have come out as well. Let's see if we've got any tenderness from them. You've obviously got the bark on it, which looks lovely. So it's not quite as tender as the other one. It's kept its consistency a lot more, so it's not falling apart, but it is still pretty tender. It's just not falling apart. It still cuts very, very nicely. So 2 different consistencies there. Maybe that didn't even need as long. Maybe that didn't need the hour in the oven. Maybe it didn't need 3 hours in the smoker. This is the first time I'm smoking beef short ribs, so it's a new thing for me. But either way, that seems to have cooked it pretty well, and obviously you've got all that lovely smoky flavour. My mouth is literally watering at the moment. So I want to try both of these, see how they taste, and kind of compare and contrast and see what I think really. So let's give these a go. First of all, I'm going to try the pressure cooker beef short rib. That's obviously been cooking in that lovely stock and the beer, and I want to see how well this is cooked. So let's give this a go. That is very, very tasty. I reckon that could have had a bit longer actually. That could have maybe had another 15 minutes and had an hour and a half in total, because that could probably stand to be a little bit more tender. There's still a little bit of fat in there, but it is very, very tasty. You get all those flavours in there. You get the rich stock and a little bit of beer as well. It is very, very tasty and still pretty tender. And again, a fraction of the time of the other one. And next, let's try the one from the indoor smoker, the one that we've used those wood chips for. Like I said earlier, perhaps this could have had less time. This is the first time I'm done smoking beef short rib but it's got a very, very nice bark on it and it smells amazing. You can get all that smokiness from it. So let's give this a try as well. Oh, wow. Oh, there's so much smoky flavour in that. That is fantastic. And it's a lot more tender than I thought actually, but it's not quite as succulent as the other one, which has had that time cooking in all that beef stock and the beer as well. But there might be other things I could do with this to kind of get that succulence, but that still tastes very, very, very good. Tell you what, those do two very different jobs in different amount of times and different flavours for one piece of meat. And they both work in their own way. There's probably ways I can improve these because again, this is my first time really doing either of these in any of those cooking methods, but they are still damn tasty. I would also be very hard pressed to pick a favourite out of those two. I think if I had a favourite for flavour, it would be the smoked ones, but if I had a favourite for texture, it would be just about the slow cooker ones, just because they are a little bit more succulent. Obviously the smoked ones have taken longer, but you can refine that cooking process and maybe not need it to take as long. If anyone's got any tips for doing those, I would be very glad to hear them. And obviously the pressure cooker one gets you beef short rib in a lot shorter time. You could even potentially do that one on a weekday evening, just throw it in there, hour and a half, and you've got very tasty beef short ribs. So it could be an evening thing if you've just got a little bit of time to put it all into the pan at the start. So that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you found it interesting, useful. Let me know if you've got any insights on how to best cook these, and if you've got any questions about the devices that I've used, like the indoor smoker or the pressure cooker, then let me know. Yeah, that was an interesting one and a fun one, and I am going to go off and go and finish those beef short rib because they are both very, very tasty. So if you did enjoy that and find it useful, then obviously like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell to find out when new videos are going up, and I will see you next time on Big Foodie Geek. Take care of yourselves. Bye bye. They are like the ribs that are kind of down the lower part of the the cow, that one.